The summer of 1876 scorched the Nebraska prairie into a sea of golden grass that shimmered like water in the hot wind. The same wind that had carried Willa Kensington to the remote outpost of Cottonwood Springs with nothing but 2 valises and shattered dreams. The 22-year-old schoolteacher's chestnut hair had come loose from its pins during the grueling journey, and as she stepped off the stagecoach, the dust of the main street immediately coated her navy traveling dress. "Last stop, miss," the driver called down, already tossing her luggage to the ground with alarming disregard. Willa flinched at the thud of her possessions hitting the dirt. Those 2 bags contained everything she owned in the world, a pitiful collection after fleeing her home in Boston following her father's financial ruin and subsequent death. The teaching position in this frontier town represented her last hope. "Is there someone meeting you?" The driver asked, his expression suggesting he already knew the answer. Willa straightened her shoulders. "The school board chairman should be expecting me." A brittle laugh escaped the driver. "School's been closed for months, miss. Town couldn't afford a teacher anymore." The blood drained from Willa's face. "There must be some mistake. I received a letter." Probably sent before the mine went bust. Half the town packed up and left after that. The world seemed to tilt beneath Willa's feet. The position had been her salvation, her only chance at rebuilding some semblance of a life. Without it, she had nowhere to go, no family to return to, and precious little money. She managed to thank the driver before he climbed back onto his seat, flicked the reins, and continued on his route, leaving her alone in the dusty street. Several townsfolk glanced her way with curious expressions before returning to their business, clearly uninterested in another stranger passing through. Willa gathered her bags and made her way to what appeared to be the town's only hotel, a weathered 2-story building with peeling paint. The lobby was empty except for an elderly clerk who barely looked up from his newspaper. "I need a room," Willa said, trying to keep her voice from trembling. $2 a night, pay in advance." His tone left no room for negotiation. Willa's heart sank. At that rate, her meager savings would last less than 2 weeks. "Is there somewhere else? Something more affordable?" The clerk finally looked at her properly, his roomy eyes scanning her travel-worn appearance. "Widow Jensen sometimes takes in boarders. 3 blocks down, white house with blue shutters." The widow's house proved easy to find, though Willa's reception was less than enthusiastic. "Another one looking for work?" the stout woman asked, arms crossed over her flour-dusted apron. "Ever since the mine closed, I've had nothing but desperate folk on my doorstep." "I was hired as the schoolteacher," Willa explained, "but it seems the position no longer exists." Something in the older woman's expression softened. "You came all the way from back east for nothing, then?" Willa nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. "Well, I've got a room. $5 a week includes 2 meals a day." It was still more than Willa could afford long-term, but she had little choice. She followed Mrs. Jensen upstairs to a small but clean room that would now be her temporary home. That evening, after unpacking her few belongings, Willa sat on the edge of the narrow bed and allowed herself to weep silently. The enormity of her situation crashed over her like a wave. No job, no family, no prospects. What had she been thinking, traveling to this remote place on the promise of a position that might have disappeared months ago? Morning arrived with cruel brightness, forcing Willa to face her first full day in Cottonwood Springs. After a simple breakfast with Mrs. Jensen, she decided to visit the town's businesses to inquire about work. Surely someone needed help. 4 hours later, Willa had been turned away from every establishment in town. The general store already had a clerk, the saloon wouldn't consider a respectable woman for employment, and the dressmaker barely had enough work to support herself. Even the hotel had no need for additional staff. By mid-afternoon, Willa found herself at the edge of town, staring out at the endless prairie. The wind whipped her skirts around her ankles as tears stung her eyes. "Nobody wants me," she whispered to the empty landscape. I've been waiting for you." The deep voice startled Willa so badly she nearly lost her balance. She whirled around to find a man atop a chestnut horse watching her with an expression of quiet curiosity. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of a summer storm. A well-worn Stetson shaded his face, and his simple clothes spoke of practical frontier living. "Pardon me," Willa managed, hastily wiping away her tears. The stranger dismounted in one fluid motion, keeping a respectful distance. "You must be the schoolteacher that never showed up for the interview, Elias Quinn." He tipped his hat slightly. "I'm on the school board, or what's left of it." Willa stared at him in confusion, but I was told the school closed months ago. A frown crossed his weathered features. "Who told you that?" The stagecoach driver. "He said the mine closed and the town couldn't afford a teacher anymore." Elias Quinn's expression darkened. "The mine did close, that's true enough, but some of us have been trying to keep the school open. Children still need learning, especially now." Hope flickered in Willa's chest, though she tried to suppress it. "Are you saying the position might still be available? It's not quite that simple." He gestured toward town. "Would you walk with me? I can explain the situation better." They walked side by side down the main street, Elias leading his horse. After the mine closed, the town council voted to cut all non-essential services, including the school. A few of us disagreed, thinking education should be the last thing to go, not the first. "That seems sensible," Willa offered. "Sensible doesn't always win out here." A wry smile touched his lips. "We formed our own board and collected what funds we could to keep the school running, at least part-time. We've been teaching the children ourselves these past months, but none of us are qualified." Willa considered this. "So there is a position, but it may not pay what was originally offered." "It won't," he confirmed. "We can offer room and board plus a small stipend." "It's not much, but it's honest work." "Where would I stay?" Willa asked, thinking of Mrs. Jensen's costly room. "The old schoolhouse has living quarters attached, simple but private." They had reached a small building at the edge of town that Willa had overlooked during her earlier explorations. The wooden structure needed paint, and one window was cracked, but it stood solid against the prairie wind. "It's not what you expected, I'm sure," Elias said quietly. Willa examined the building, then turned to study the man beside her. There was something steady in his gaze, a reliability that seemed rare in a world that had proven so unpredictable. "When can I start?" she asked. Elias's smile transformed his face, revealing a dimple in his right cheek. "Tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock, we've got 12 students ages 6 to 16. 12 students of varying ages in one room. That will be challenging." "Life out here usually is," he replied, "but the rewards match the challenges." Willa wasn't certain if he was still talking about teaching. The schoolhouse quarters were indeed simple one room with a bed, table, chair, and small stove. But the space was clean and Elias had arranged for fresh linens and basic supplies. "The pump is out back," he explained, setting down her bags. "Outhouse too. Wood for the stove is stacked along the side wall. Should be enough to get you through a couple of weeks." Willa nodded, overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events. Just hours ago, she had been contemplating her imminent destitution. "Thank you, Mr. Quinn." "Elias," he corrected. "Out here, formality doesn't last long. I run the cattle ranch north of town. If you need anything, send word." After he left, Willa sat on the edge of the narrow bed, much as she had done at Mrs. Jensen's the night before. But this time, instead of despair, she felt something like hope beginning to take root. The next morning, Willa dressed carefully in her best navy skirt and white shirtwaist, pinning her hair into a neat bun at the nape of her neck. By 7:30, she had arranged the schoolroom as best she could, setting out the few books and materials available on the students' desks. The children arrived in small groups, their curious eyes taking in the new teacher with undisguised interest. Willa introduced herself and began the day with a simple assessment to determine each child's educational level. By noon, her head was swimming. The gaps in their education were significant, with some of the older children barely able to read. The younger ones were eager but restless, unused to structured learning after months without formal schooling. As she dismissed them for lunch, Elias appeared at the doorway. "Thought you might need this," he said, offering a basket covered with a checkered cloth. First days are always the hardest. Willa accepted the basket gratefully, discovering a simple but hearty lunch of bread, cheese, and apples inside. "How are they doing?" Elias asked, leaning against the doorframe. "They're bright children," Willa replied carefully. "But there's much work to be done. And are you up to it?" The question wasn't challenging but genuinely curious. Willa considered her answer. "I believe I am," she said finally, "though I'll need more books and supplies." Elias nodded thoughtfully. "I'll see what I can do." The supply wagon comes through next week. After he left, Willa found herself thinking about the quiet rancher more than she should. There was something about his steadfast manner that drew her attention. He seemed a man of few words but significant action, a rare combination in her experience. The following days established a routine. Willa taught from morning until mid-afternoon, then spent her evenings preparing lessons and making what improvements she could to her small living quarters. Occasionally, Elias would stop by with additional supplies or to check on the school's condition. 2 weeks after her arrival, a spring storm swept across the prairie, bringing torrential rain that quickly overwhelmed the schoolhouse's aging roof. Willa had just dismissed the children when the first significant leak appeared, water streaming down the back wall. She grabbed the only container she had, a washing basin, and placed it under the worst of the leak, but soon other drips appeared. As darkness fell, the storm intensified, and Willa realized her quarters would soon be flooded as well. A knock at the door startled her. Opening it, she found Elias standing in the downpour, water streaming from his hat brim. "Grab what you need for the night," he called over the storm's roar. "You can't stay here." "Where?" "My ranch. It's closest and I've got spare rooms." Under normal circumstances, Willa would have refused such an offer to preserve her reputation. But as water began pooling around her feet inside the schoolhouse, propriety seemed less important than shelter. She hastily packed a small bag with essentials and donned her coat. Elias helped her onto his horse, mounting behind her, and they set off into the stormy night. The journey to the ranch was a blur of wind and rain. Willa was soaked through by the time they arrived at a substantial log house set against a backdrop of cottonwood trees. A barn and several outbuildings completed the homestead. "Martha," Elias called as they entered the warm kitchen. An older woman with iron-gray hair emerged from another room, her eyes widening at the sight of the drenched pair. "Good heavens! Get those wet things off before you catch your death." "Martha's my housekeeper," Elias explained to Willa. "Has been since my parents died." The older woman ushered Willa upstairs to a bedroom, providing a nightgown and robe that had belonged to Elias's late mother. Once changed, Willa joined them in the kitchen, where Martha had prepared hot tea and stew. "The schoolhouse roof has been needing repair for months," Elias said as they ate. "I'll gather some men tomorrow to fix it properly." "That's very kind, but I don't want to impose," Willa said. Elias's gaze met hers across the table. "It's not an imposition. The school matters to this community, Miss Kensington." "Willa," she corrected softly. "If I'm to call you Elias, then you should use my given name as well." A slight smile curved his lips. "Willa, then." Martha glanced between them with knowing eyes before excusing herself for the night, leaving them alone in the kitchen's warmth. "How did you come to ranching?" Willa asked, curious about the man who had so unexpectedly become her benefactor. "Family business," Elias replied, pouring more tea for them both. "My father started with 10 head of cattle and built it into something substantial. When he and my mother died of fever 5 years ago, it fell to me to continue." "You had no siblings?" A shadow crossed his face. "A brother. He left for California during the gold rush, never returned." "I'm sorry," Willa said quietly. Elias shrugged. Life out here is rarely what we expect. What about you? What brought you all the way from Boston to our little corner of nowhere?" Willa hesitated, unaccustomed to sharing her circumstances, but something about the man's direct gaze encouraged honesty. "My father was a merchant," she began. "When his business failed, he took his own life. The creditors took everything else." Elias's expression remained steady, showing neither pity nor judgment. "That must have been difficult." "It was," Willa admitted. "Teaching was the only respectable option available to me, and do you enjoy it?" Teaching, the question surprised her. Few had ever asked about her satisfaction with her chosen profession. "I do," she realized aloud. "More than I expected to, especially here. These children are eager to learn despite their circumstances." They talked late into the night, the storm raging outside while they remained in the kitchen's sheltered warmth. Willa found herself sharing thoughts she'd never voiced aloud: her fears about the future, her hopes to make a difference in her students' lives, her surprise at finding purpose in this remote place she'd initially viewed as a last resort. Elias listened attentively, offering insights about the community and its people that helped Willa better understand her new home. When they finally retired to their respective rooms, Willa lay awake, puzzling over the unexpected connection she felt to the quiet rancher. The next day dawned clear, the storm having spent its fury overnight. After breakfast, Elias drove Willa back to town in his wagon, stopping first at the schoolhouse to assess the damage. Water had soaked several areas of the wooden floor, and 3 distinct leaks had appeared in the roof. Elias made notes of the repairs needed, promising to return with help that afternoon. "Classes should probably be canceled today," he suggested. Willa nodded reluctantly. "I'll put a notice on the door." "You're welcome to stay at the ranch until the repairs are complete," Elias offered. Martha seemed pleased to have another woman about the place. The propriety of such an arrangement was questionable, but Willa had few alternatives. Mrs. Jensen's boarding house was full, and the hotel remained beyond her means. "That's very kind," she said. "But only until the schoolhouse is habitable again." True to his word, Elias returned that afternoon with 3 men and a wagon full of supplies. Willa watched from a distance as they climbed onto the roof, removing damaged shingles and replacing them with new ones. By evening, the leaks were sealed, though the interior floors would need time to dry completely. "Another day or two," Elias told her as they prepared to return to the ranch. "We'll need to make sure everything's properly dry before you move back in." Those days at the Quinn ranch changed something between them. Working alongside Martha in the kitchen or sitting on the porch in the evenings, Willa began to see glimpses of the man beneath Elias's reserved exterior. He was thoughtful and well-read, with a dry humor that emerged when he was comfortable. He treated his ranch hands fairly and knew each of their families by name. On the 3rd evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the prairie in shades of gold and crimson, Elias turned to her with an unusually serious expression. "Town council's meeting tomorrow night," he said. "They're voting on whether to officially reopen the school with proper funding." Willa's heart quickened. "Do you think they'll approve it? I've been talking to folks making the case. Most see the value in it now, especially after watching their children these past weeks." "What changed their minds?" Elias's gaze rested on her face. "You did. They've seen what a proper teacher can accomplish, even with limited resources." Heat rose to Willa's cheeks at the compliment. "The children deserve the opportunity to learn, regardless of their circumstances." "That's what I've been saying all along." He hesitated, then added, "If the council approves the funding, would you consider staying? Permanently, I mean." The question caught Willa off guard. She had been thinking of her position as temporary, a stepping stone until something better came along. But now, faced with the possibility of leaving, she realized how attached she'd grown to the school, the children, the community, and to Elias. "I would," she said softly. "I've found something here I didn't expect." His eyes held hers for a long moment before he nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. The town council meeting the following evening was held in the back room of the general store. Willa sat nervously as the members discussed various matters before finally turning to the question of the school. "We've all seen the improvement in our young ones since Miss Kensington arrived," said the blacksmith, a burly man with a surprisingly gentle manner. "My boy's reading better than ever." Others nodded in agreement, though the owner of the general store remained skeptical. "We still don't have the funds we had before the mine closed," he pointed out. "Where's this money supposed to come from?" Elias stood then, his tall frame commanding attention. "I've secured commitments from several ranchers in the area to contribute. Their children benefit from the school too, even if they ride in from outside town limits." The discussion continued for nearly an hour, with various community members voicing opinions. Willa held her breath as the final vote was tallied. "Motion passes," announced the council chairman. "The school will receive official funding beginning next month. Miss Kensington, it seems you have a permanent position if you want it." Relief and joy washed over Willa as several people approached to congratulate her. Through the crowd, her eyes found Elias, who watched her with a smile that reached his normally guarded eyes. Later that evening, he walked her back to the now repaired schoolhouse. "I should thank you," Willa said as they reached her door. "Without your support, none of this would have happened." "I just provided the opportunity," Elias replied. "You're the one who proved your worth to the town." In the silvery moonlight, his features seemed softer than usual, and Willa found herself studying the strong line of his jaw, the way his dark hair curled slightly where it met his collar. "Would you like to come in for tea?" she asked impulsively. "To celebrate." A flicker of something anticipation, crossed his face before he nodded. "I'd like that." The small quarters felt even smaller with Elias's presence filling the space. Willa busied herself with the kettle, acutely aware of him standing near the window, looking out into the night. "You know," he said conversationally, "when I first found you at the edge of town that day saying nobody wanted you, I wasn't entirely truthful in my response." Willa turned to look at him, puzzled. "What do you mean?" "I said I'd been waiting for you." He met her gaze directly. "I meant it, but not just about the teaching position." Her heart began to pound as he continued. "I've watched you these past weeks, your dedication to the children, your resilience despite the challenges. I've come to admire you, Willa, more than admire." The kettle began to whistle, but neither moved to attend to it. "I'm not a man who speaks easily about such things," Elias continued, taking a careful step toward her. "But I believe in honesty. And honestly, I find myself hoping you might consider staying in Cottonwood Springs for reasons beyond the school." Willa's breath caught in her throat. "What reasons would those be?" "Me," he said simply. "Us. What might be possible between us given time." The directness of his declaration both thrilled and frightened her. She had come west to escape disaster, not to find attachment. "Elias, you don't need to answer now," he said quickly. "I know it's sudden, I just wanted you to know where I stand." The kettle's whistle grew more insistent. Willa turned away to remove it from the heat, grateful for the moment to collect her thoughts. When she turned back, Elias had moved closer, close enough that she could see the varying shades of gray in his eyes. "I came here with nothing," she said softly. "No prospects, no future. Just desperation. And now I have purpose. The school, the children, a community that's beginning to feel like home." She took a deep breath. "And you," his expression softened. "Is that your way of saying you might consider my interest?" "It's my way of saying I already have." Willa surprised herself with her boldness. "You were the first person who saw value in me when I arrived, the only one who offered help without condition." Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, Elias raised his hand to gently touch her cheek. "There is one condition now," he murmured. "That you allow me to court you properly. Sunday dinners, social gatherings, chaperoned visits, the works." A smile spread across Willa's face. "That's a condition I can accept." The following months transformed Cottonwood Springs for Willa. The school flourished under her guidance, with enrollment growing as word spread to outlying homesteads. The town council, seeing the benefits of education, allocated funds for new books and supplies. But the most significant change was in Willa herself. The desperate young woman who had arrived with nothing but shattered dreams had found purpose, community, and most unexpectedly, love. Elias courted her with the same quiet determination he brought to everything. Sunday dinners at his ranch became a cherished ritual. He attended school functions and town socials at her side. They rode across the prairie together on summer evenings, Elias teaching Willa to appreciate the wild beauty of her new home. By Christmas, the entire town had recognized what was developing between the schoolteacher and the rancher. When Elias escorted Willa to the holiday gathering at the church, Martha winked knowingly at them from across the room. "Everyone's watching us," Willa whispered as they shared a dance. "Let them," Elias replied, his hand warm against the small of her back. "I'm proud to be seen with you." Later that evening, as they walked through the gently falling snow toward the schoolhouse, Elias stopped suddenly. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his coat pocket. "A Christmas gift." He handed her a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with a red ribbon. Willa opened it carefully to reveal a delicate silver locket. "It was my mother's," Elias explained as he helped her fasten it around her neck. "She always said it should go to the woman I chose to share my life with." Willa's fingers trembled as they touched the locket. "Elias." He took her gloved hands in his. "I'm not asking yet, not formally, but I want you to know my intentions. When you're ready, when you're certain, I'll be here." Standing in the snowy street, the locket cool against her skin, Willa realized she was already certain. This man, this town, this life, they had become her home in ways Boston never had. "I don't need more time," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion filling her chest. "I already know what I want." Spring brought renewal to the prairie, wildflowers blooming across the grasslands and new calves dotting Elias's pastures. It also brought a wedding, simple but joyful, with the entire community gathered to celebrate. Willa wore a cream-colored dress that Martha had helped her sew, with the silver locket nestled at her throat. Elias waited for her at the front of the church, his usually reserved expression transformed by happiness as she walked toward him. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, and Willa felt the rightness of the moment settle deep in her bones. Later, as they drove toward the ranch, their ranch now, Elias took her hand. "Happy?" he asked. Willa thought of that desperate day at the edge of town when she had whispered to the empty prairie that nobody wanted her. How wrong she had been. "More than I ever imagined possible," she replied, squeezing his hand. "You were waiting for me all along, just as you said." "And I'd wait all over again," Elias told her, his voice husky with emotion. "For another 100 years if necessary." As the wagon crested the hill, their home came into view, the solid log house, the barns and corrals, the cottonwood trees swaying in the spring breeze. And beyond it, the endless prairie that had once seemed so foreign and now felt like exactly where she belonged. Willa Kensington Quinn had come west with nothing and found everything. A purpose, a community, a love to last a lifetime. And as Elias helped her down from the wagon, his arms strong and sure around her waist, she knew with absolute certainty that this was only the beginning of their story.